Hello and welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Rahim Rahimtullah. We are at the DCAF conference on security sector governance in Ukraine. Joining me now is one of the guest speakers from the DCAF, Ms. Claudia Miccichè. Ms. Miccichè, many thanks for joining us. Perhaps to start, you could just tell us a little bit about the DCAF. Its aims, it's an intergovernmental organization which is, I believe, engaged in all sorts of questions related to reform of the armed forces in several countries.
Exactly. First of all, thank you for inviting me. And as you mentioned, DCAF is an international foundation based in Geneva with 64 member states. And we, as you say, we support different states in reform security sector, and in general, the security sector governance is part of our portfolio, I will say. Personally, I'm coordinator for the NIS program, the New Independent States, and they are, of course, Ukraine is part of them, and Georgia, Moldova, Central Asia.
So we're talking about states here from the former Soviet Union.
Exactly, exactly. And I would say that today I had the pleasure and the honor to be here in Kiev and during the conference where we had the opportunity to talk about security sector governance here in Ukraine and all the change that are now having, and we can in such a way sometimes support or just like to better know, because I really like to highlight, as we are an international organization, but we need also Ukrainian, to know in a better way what about your reform,
yes,
your laws, and which way we can support you in reforming this reform.
What are the challenges that you see in these newly independent states, and are they uniform across the board? Or, for example, here in Ukraine, do you see specific challenges that you don't have, for example, in Georgia or Moldova? What's the picture like?
Yeah, of course. It's a good question, and it's totally. There are some similarity, but at the same time, there are also different countries with their needs, priorities, and this is our challenge as well, to try to understand in which way we can position it. Ukraine is in an unbelievable, I would say, transition period, and it's really interesting to better understand what we can offer in that meaning.
Is it about taking best practices, for example, from the West and simply importing them here, or is it a little more complicated? Absolutely
more complicated. What we want to avoid is just importing something here, because each country has its own history and a way to evolve. Maybe it could be completely different from another country that, even if it's close, it's different for a lot of reasons. Could be, current conditions, government, external environment, society, how the social media as well, they can affect this evolution or just make it better. So we don't want to import.
No.
Just we want to maybe share best practice, of course, and then we need to adapt to the local needs. It doesn't matter which is the country. Ukraine is like Zambia.
Sure. And one of the things I think we see in Ukraine, which perhaps is less been seen in other countries, is that civil society here has been very active since we had the Maidan revolution a couple of years ago, and that includes in the armed forces, because we've had a lot of volunteer battalions which have sprung up, and they've been very important to fighting the Russian-backed separatist forces in eastern Ukraine. How do you see these volunteer battalions in Ukraine? Is that a positive thing, or is it dangerous? Because some analysts do say that without the government being able to control these battalions, that is potentially a very dangerous situation.
Well, I will say that it's really positive, the fact that there is a civil society, an active civil society. I think we need to make sure there is like a civil society participation. Doesn't matter, it's like that can also allow, I will say, women participation, vulnerable groups participation, minority groups participation as well. So in that meaning, I think it's really good when there is a civil society participation. Of course, the really good thing is when then civil society, that could be like a watchdog, an oversight instrument as well, can work together with parliament, with government, with all the ministry in general. This is the best way to make sure that we can together reach a good goal. That, of course, is not so easy.
Of course, but you mentioned there the role of women being involved in the armed forces. Now, I know this was a topic of your discussion here at the conference. Now, gender equality, human rights, governance of the armed forces, these are not concepts necessarily which we might think intersect. So perhaps you can unpack that a little bit for us. How do these three quite different things come together?
Yeah, sure. It's so true, because when we think about security sector, security, we don't think about the fact that we have just a society. I mean, when we want to make sure that there is a secure society, we need to think about all citizens, and citizens are men and women, boys and girls. So, I mean, we need to find a way to protect all of them. So, I will say that it's not maybe so evident, this kind of connection, but it is. So if you want to provide a secure environment, we need to think about how to involve also the vulnerable groups, women, boys, girls, migrants. I mean, all together, they need to, in such a way, to participate to this process.
And does this necessarily mean that they all need to fight in the armed forces? Does this mean that you need a wide conscription? I mean, for example, there are examples where we can look at, for example, Norway, Switzerland, where they have a conscription and women are also involved in this. Now, it doesn't always mean they go and fight and learn how to use a gun. It can take other forms, civil forms. Is this... What are the models here that we look at?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting what you say right now, because of course when we think about women or their participation, we want to make sure that they can not only participate to the process, but they need to, in such a way, be at policy making levels. So, for example, today we had Miss Irina Fries from the Member of Parliament. She's a Member of Parliament. It's a good example, as like she's a woman, as she is in such a way participating to policy making levels. So it's a way also to make sure that all these vulnerable groups, so also women, they can affect in such a way this level of decision.
And speaking particularly in the context in Ukraine, do you see that is happening? Like you say, you have one member of parliament there, she's an example. Is this getting down to the grassroots level? Because I know, for example, there are women who do fight in eastern Ukraine. They're often part of volunteer battalions, and I think they're not officially allowed on the front line. So, I mean, there's one example where we are seeing a real engagement from groups which we might not otherwise be involved. I mean, is that your impression too, that we are seeing some progress?
I think so, absolutely. I think so, yeah. I think there is a really good and positive aspect about women involvement in the different area in Ukraine, absolutely.
Finally, Mrs. Miccichè, we're almost out of time, unfortunately. So perhaps we just look ahead. What's your feeling on Ukraine and the armed forces? I mean, for you, it's about expanding into minority groups, women. Is that in some way important for the armed forces as a whole? If they can enact these reforms in some way, if they can have a more inclusive participation, is that for you ultimately a good test of progress in reforms here in the armed forces?
I think it's possible, and I think it should be in such a way the good direction to take. Much more inclusive, and thinking also in this multi-stakeholder levels, thinking about a national level, local community, local ownership, and also align with all the international actors that in such a way are connected, that they influence, by the way, also Ukraine. So absolutely this is the way, and I'm confident that something will evolve. Fantastic.
Well, of course, we, like you, will be looking closely over the next coming weeks and months. We'll see how it evolves. Ms. Claudia Miccichè, many thanks for joining us here on Ukraine Today. That's where we'll have to leave it, unfortunately.
Thank you.
You've been watching Ukraine Today. I've been joined by Ms. Claudia Miccichè of the DCAF. We're here at the Security Conference. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today, but do join us again, and many thanks for watching.